Hello there, and welcome to Gooner U, where there are no degrees because the learning never stops. I'm Dove, a TA here at Gooner U, and my friend Keith is our stalwart, distinguished professor of Arsenal and football studies. This week featured this season's final away match at Old Trafford against longtime rivals Manchester United. Hello, Keith.
Hello, Dove. I'm drying out a little bit here, actually. It's not a comment about the rain at the end of the game because it rained in here, in Houston as well. Not in my apartment, that'd be
okay.
bad,
Thank
but
goodness.
In Houston. It rained in Houston both yesterday and today. So, but yes, everybody rain's always more fun when you win. Everything's more fun when you win.
It's also more fun when you're indoors.
Also true. Well, let me rephrase that. Rain is no fun when you're if it's raining indoors, then you have a real problem. But
yeah, so a couple things before we get to what started out as a sunny match and turned into a rainy match. First of all, to let everyone know, last week we posted our first YouTube shorts. These are 1 minute or shorter videos. Last week they were tightly edited excerpts from our discussion of the new home and away kits, one video each. Going forward, we're going to come up with unique stuff, either possibly covering a topic that we talked about on the show, or maybe not. Go to our channel, which was always linked, and you can see what's there. We got a few comments that we wanted to share with everyone. One is from viewer LP. His YouTube handle is LP5670. He commented on the away kit short. I'm not going to read the whole comment here, but he was basically only mentioning Ian Wright as having a camo on Ted Lasso is selling Ian Wright short by quite a bit. And clearly we agree that was not our intention as representing that as the pinnacle of his achievements. And it was made even worse when I edited down that segment and cut out what little else Keith did say about him in that episode and removed it. So Keith, why don't you tell us about Ian Wright a little bit?
This isn't Ian Wright and I'm sure I don't know, maybe you wouldn't want it to be. He's a Golden Boot winner. He was Arsenal's player of the season twice. He was also he was the club's all-time leading scorer. Records. We talk about Thierry Henry, and I have waxed poetic about Henry many times in the show. The Wright's record is the one he broke. Really an excellent player for Arsenal in the 90s. He is a Hall of Famer. Again, you pull up the list of his achievements. Premier League Hall of Fame doesn't quite matter in Europe in the same way it does in the US, but it's still a cool thing.
That's good to know. I knew some of those things about Ian Wright, that's for sure. It's a lot of halls of fame. Next comment was from listener Tom Creasy. He is at Creasicle on YouTube. And he said about the new home kit that he actually really likes it, and he hasn't liked the home shirt since the 2020-2021 season. So, I think it's a pretty good one too. Like I said, I like it more than this season. It's at least tied from what I've seen so far with 2 seasons ago, and I can't wait to see it on the players. I
have heard mixed reactions on it. I do know people who like it. I'm not saying it can't be liked. I just don't care for it, but it's fine,
Right. Our next comment is from a user whose name on YouTube is Kai USA. I like to think that this is the United States YouTube account of Kai Havertz. It's probably not, but he said good pod, and thank you. That's a very kind comment, and we appreciate it. So meanwhile, on to the news. What's going on with our team, our players?
Big news from last week pre the game, or from earlier in the week, is that Jorginho will stay. He's extended his contract. The last thing I saw said short term, which isn't a surprise. At 32, he is old for a player, for a professional athlete. He's, it's why we love players like Pepe, who are older than us still. It tells me there's still hope. But yes, he's been an important part of the team. He will be here, presumably at least through next season, and who knows how long that will go. But good to have him stay a little bit longer. He's been a critical piece for us, and hopefully for the rest of the time he's here.
Yeah, that's certainly something that'll come up in the context of the match, is Jorginho versus Partey, how that may have affected things yesterday. I think that's it for follow-up and news. I think we're about ready to get into the match. So this is our 37th and penultimate match, I was about to say episode, of the season. This was May 12th, yesterday as we record. The final score was Manchester United 0, Arsenal 1. It felt, at least at times, like a nail biter, certainly in the last 15, 20 minutes, maybe 25 if you include stoppage time. It reminded me of a certain other match from our recent past.
I mean, I'm kind of two minds about this, because on the one hand, let's be honest, we were not very good.
No.
Like, we've had worse games this season, Fulham. But by and large, especially against a United team that is not very good to begin with and is dealing with injuries. Brought some youth players on at to the end. One of the players they brought on there at the end was, I think, is 18. It's just, I don't, so this is a team that we should have on paper walked our way through, and that of course did not happen. However, it's May. We're at Old Trafford, a place we had not won since 2006.
Right, I saw that.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
Against a team that's given us troubles even in games. We think to there last year, where we frankly outplayed them for much of the game and still lost. We needed some late goals to beat them. The two games at the Emirates, again, United teams that were not particularly good. All that together, and of course the pressure of being in the title race as we are. Mm-hmm. There's no such thing as a bad win in May, and so everything was glorious. And I don't know. I'm gonna throw this at you. You sort of hinted at this. In some ways, maybe this is just an after the fact impression, but it reminded me a lot of the Bournemouth game, where on the one hand, it felt nervy at times. There were moments where it felt close, like, I don't know, maybe we don't want to blow this. But then you look back and look at sort of the broader picture of the game, especially statistically, and think, there was never any real danger, was there?
Yeah. Yeah, so I definitely see what you're saying there. And then that occurred to me at various points during and since. I think ultimately the moments that felt dangerous, like when you see the same deflation of a danger over and over again, and I'm specifically thinking of Garnacho, right? Mm. And I don't know how much of this is his fault and how much was Ben White doing a good job, combination of getting in his head and actually physically defending against him. But he had a bunch of chances where potentially another player or possibly the same player against a weaker defense might have been able to score, depending on your view of what happened there. I think there was some danger. And I think especially not only our overall lack of quality, where the bar for us was lower than it has been, but also a specific manner in which that manifested, which was a lot of sloppiness, a lot of mistakes, a lot of careless plays that led to their chances. I at least some of it was luck. I think that there was a possibility, especially with this slim margin, there was a possibility that things could change. It wasn't like they're an awful team that failed to capitalize. It's a decent team missing their best players, and it was funny. Some of my thoughts are definitely informed by listening to the special Arscast did last night. I listened to some of that today, and I'm repeating what they've said that did occur to me also, even though I maybe hadn't formed it in my head. But when Anthony came on, that was a little bit okay, he's one of their better players. I remember him from the past. He's coming on. What's he going to do? I felt a little bit concerned when they brought him in.
Yeah, potentially a dangerous player. And he's Anthony in some ways reminds me a little bit of Nicolas Pepe, not in their style of play. They're very different players, but just sort of it's hard to disassociate him from how much money he costs. Okay. And not in the sort of cheeky way we talk about Kai Havertz, 60 million on the drain, or we got Declan Rice for half price.
Haven't heard that one.
but in the sense that he paid a lot of money for a guy who's not that good. But yes, obviously someone can create some danger. But I think about a lot of times you look at shots that just sort of were never really close to goal.
Right.
Or they wind up just being harmless crosses that David Raya did very well with, to
mostly
handle. Yeah.
There's the one notable one where he just like kind of missed, but yeah.
but yeah, I don't know. Again, there's always that sense of in the moment. It is very easy in retrospect to, like, we talked about why, when you watch games, of course, later after the fact, you hide your results for yourself. I can't not know the result. To watch a game where I know the result, I wonder watching that one if there are sometimes you do feel the nerves, but I wonder if that's one if I watched knowing the results, like, do they really come off as being dangerous and being particularly nervous?
Right?
I don't know. That's a hard thing. It's a hard position for me to put myself in. There were a few moments, especially about the first maybe 5-10 minutes, where we were really pushing them. It was kind of what I expected, that we could put them under a lot of pressure. And I mean, I remember losing their 8-2, and I wanted 8-2 the other way. That was probably always a fool's errand. Again, we got 3 points. I can't really complain too much, but we did ultimately get the goal.
It was a nice goal. It was largely their fault. Like, they really left the door wide open for us there, but it was well executed.
We should talk about that.
Yeah,
that goal is Casemiro's goal. I mean, it is, and we were saying this at the time when I was watching in the pub, and I know Arscast because I listened to the show and they talked about this too.
Yeah.
Okay, he's a defensive midfielder. He's not a central defender. He's filling in a spot because they don't have any. I'm sorry. He is a veteran player. He knows better. That is why United is 30 points behind Arsenal on the table. That is why they are playing out of the string for a manager who may or may not be there next year, and Arsenal's competing for the title. It is incredibly foolish, and lazy to walk back, to essentially allow Havertz to be onside. Like,
right.
To do that and then to not track the runner, and that's not entirely on him. He's got to have. I think it was Wan-Bissaka was behind him, but someone else has to be shouting at him. That Trossard's coming in. And full credit, Trossard makes a heck of a run. That's an incredible position for him to be in. A great one coming in, bombing in from the wing like that.
Well, and slipping between those two players, like, to get into position, it was well done. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the kind of thing, right, where you're not going to a position, you're going to space, and Havertz passing the ball into space, and so he goes to the space, and there really shouldn't have been any space, but really that goal is created by just some very poor defending from United all around, and Havertz is in position, Trossard does that thing again where he scores a goal, and it's 1-0 to the Arsenal, and
right,
and then just. It felt like we had scored late in the game and were defending a lead, in the last few minutes, rather than the fact there was 70 minutes left in the game.
Well, yeah. The thing is, though, even before that, we'd started slowing down. It was like definitely the first 5 minutes, somewhere between the 5th and 10th minute, somewhere in there was when we started kind of ceding possession more, right? And they started picking up steam. But we came out really strong in the very beginning. Of course, it's easy to keep that up for 5 minutes. We've seen other teams that are not that great do that against us at the very beginning of a match. What matters is, the other 85 minutes. But yeah, it was. What factors do you think led to the way we played?
I honestly, as I'm watching, I think the big one was nerves. I mean, sports are so mental, especially at the highest level. There's so much is just involved with, getting your head, being in the right headspace. And, we talk about the pressure of the run-in. We talked about the pressure of going to United, going to Old Trafford, the pressure of, City had won on Saturday, so we had to match them. As opposed to the last couple weeks, as opposed to the last couple weeks, right? It feels like I'm pretty sure we've played first, so we've set the standard, and then City has to match us. And they've done this before, and we really haven't. So I think that played a lot of it as well. I wasn't sure because what you also saw, because that accounts for a lot of the sloppiness, but tactically it was interesting because we didn't press them very high. And they're a team that was going to be light in the midfield. They don't that's why Casemiro's playing central defense, between injuries and other things. They're really weak in some parts of the field, like the midfield. And it's interesting that we didn't really press them up high, which, but it's interesting because we talk about Trossard being on the field. If the game you're going to play is to more sit back and invite the pressure, that to me feels more like a game for Martinelli. There was a play somewhere in the first half. Trossard had his man one-on-one, and Trossard does a lot of good things well, but he's not that fast.
Right.
Whereas with Martinelli, he cooks that guy, and he's breaking the other way. And if you're going to sit back, having a player like Martinelli to do a better job in terms of the counter seems to make more sense. But we didn't do that. And I'm kind of curious tactically, sort of how that was approached. And it's interesting because you watch enough, you always see these moments where the manager or coach never says it out loud, but some of his post game comments are kind of, well, that's not what I told them to do. I don't know why they did that. But again, there were moments, and it did feel like there were moments. And again, you're relying on the cutouts. But there's Arteta on the sidelines, and what's he doing is more like it felt like he was trying to get them to settle down a little bit. They looked a little. So I think nerves was a big part of it. Also, the field was apparently I don't want to say in rough shape, but definitely was apparently very wet because everybody was slipping all over the place.
I noticed, and that was before the sky opened up.
Apparently it had rained, I guess, either earlier in the day or the day before. Which it's England, of course it rained.
And apparently Manchester, from the commentators, sounds like maybe it's even more rainy than London, possibly. I don't know.
I've never been. Maybe.
They said something to that effect. They said something about the weather in Manchester. Yeah. So they were definitely slipping around a lot. That did have an effect on both sides. It wasn't just us; it was them too. So the commentators also said something when they came back from the halftime that they must have really wet the field, and probably not. If they're doing it so much that their own players aren't used to it, it's probably not that.
And we do know there are definitely instances where teams will overwater the field or will let it dry out because they have a style they want to play, or especially they'll overwater, let the grass grow long as well as a way to, especially to slow down a faster team. But I don't think that's really what was going on here. Again, that's the kind of thing where you, as the home team, are more prepared for that, and so like both of them. Like we were sitting there saying, like, man, maybe they gotta replace the spikes, gotta get the longer cleats.
Well, that occurred to me too. Like when everybody's sliding around so much, it's like that's what cleats are for. Like, what is wrong? Yeah, but here?
I mean, there are some with longer studs for that kind of environment. But
okay. So you're saying actually replace it with a different type, not just like replacing worn out, but actually a different length. You will have instances where you'll have longer cleats for that kind of, because they can dig more. They can dig deeper into the ground. Right. That makes sense. I imagine that would also slow you down, though, probably. If they're like sticking into the ground more, it might kind of give you a little more resistance picking your foot up, maybe.
Yes, but you're going to do, with the waterlogged field, you're going to go, that's the whole point of adding the water, theoretically, is that it's going to slow the game down, especially when you're playing a more skilled team, a team that will play fast, like Arsenal. You'll want to slow them down a little bit. So
that's interesting.
Yes, it's all part of the tactical plan of that sort of thing.
That's funny. Like, so that's something new to think about. I never really thought about changing the studs on the shoes. Like, I wonder, that makes it even more curious that they didn't do that at halftime, because they were slipping like immediately after halftime. You'd think, having slipped and slided in the beginning, that's something they could have adjusted in the locker room.
You would think, but I got to be honest, that's one of those interior things I don't really know how. They'll talk about this, like changing cleats. I hear this a lot with American football. In the old days, they would actually be able to like screw the cleats out and put new, the studs out and put in different ones. I don't think the modern boots work that way. I think they're part of it. So maybe it would involve changing shoes, which maybe guys don't want to do. I don't know. Maybe you don't. I don't want to say they don't have them, but there's a rather famous incident I'm just thinking off the top of my head in American football history. It's called the sneakers game, where actually there was the opposite problem. It was played in the winter, so there was ice. And so one team basically had their equipment manager go to a sporting goods store, bought a whole bunch of sneakers. So they went no cleats because the cleats were getting no grip at all. So they went to sneakers, slid around, but they actually had better maneuverability as opposed to with the spikes. So
interesting. So the slipping and sliding was definitely a factor, and I mean it's we definitely outshot them. Like we had a lot more shots on goal. Their keeper did have some really amazing saves. There was at least a couple occasions in the second half where we really should have scored, and he did an amazing job blocking those shots.
Yeah, Onana was actually pretty good overall. I thought he made a few saves. Again, that goes to the sense of danger. Bournemouth, we scored that goal. It was 2-0. And so like it takes a little bit of the danger away. We don't get the second goal, in the United one here. And some of that, a lot of that goes to Onana, who, as you said, made a couple of really good saves. But again, that sense of control and taking opportunities. I did think, in spite of all of it, we had the better chances overall than they did. Again, as I said, I felt like a lot of theirs kind of ended up not really close to the net. That was my impression anyway.
Yeah. What did you think about Garnacho? Like, it seemed like he was the player who was trying to pose the most threat. Clearly ended up being toothless. Like just about every time it went wide or high when he shot. What do you think was the reason for that? Was that him as a player? Was it Ben White? Like, what do you think was going on?
I think it's a combination of things. I mean, again, Garnacho is a nice player. I don't know, that's a lot to rely on. I mean, we talk about the players they're missing, the two big ones. Marcus Rashford was hurt. Bruno Fernandes also hurt. I mean, I have my thoughts on Fernandes in particular. But I mean, he is a talented player, and he is the kind of guy that I wonder, given the way we played, if he was there, maybe he finds them in some better opportunities. Because it didn't look like, I mean, Garnacho was meant to be their danger man, but I don't really see. Again, sort of in retrospect, I mean, none of his chances really turned into anything particularly good. And some of that is defending as well. The defenders, as much as I don't think our midfield played very well, I don't think our forwards played very well. I did think, I thought our defenders, or the defense overall, was good. And, really sort of limiting their opportunities. Limiting their quality opportunities. It's always slipping. Sometimes, we talked about like body positioning on shots. Your foot slips as you're taking the shot. You lean back, and therefore the ball goes up into the second deck as opposed to on goal. So.
Yeah, there's one particular defensive moment I noted in the 58th minute. Garnacho had the ball just outside the penalty box, and Saliba just picked the ball away from him so precisely, so perfectly, in a way that there was never any chance of causing a penalty.
So good.
It was amazing.
So that was that I know exactly the play you're talking about. That was just an unreal play by just an amazing player. So
what did you think of the officiation? Like, I noticed a lack of calls. The whistle, especially for the first half, it was like barely blown at all. He kind of started handing out the yellows toward the end a little bit. But what did you think of the officiation?
It certainly is frustrating in the moment. It was definitely a very old school kind of game. Like they let a lot go physically. And the only thing that frustrates me about that is it feels like a game where there's definitely, they're going to let a lot go, and then suddenly a call that they haven't made all day is suddenly going to be a card. And that's what sort of frustrates me. It's a little annoying to me that there were only 2 cards given out in the whole game. Now, one of them was Raya for time wasting, which totally fine. Totally fine.
Deserved, yeah.
The other one was on Saka. Now, was it a rough challenge he puts on the guy? Sure. But it comes after, he's the recipient of a similar one going the other, or so. I don't know if it was him, but, United had put in a relatively similar tackle the other way, and which got no call, which is one of those, like, there were a couple I saw where I might have been Rice, like, shoulder checked a United player.
Right.
And it just kept going, okay. And again, It's one of those, if this is how the game's going to go, this is how the game's going to go. I didn't see anything. I mean, I thought Bournemouth was much more physical in kind of I don't want to say a dirty way, but definitely in kind of a, like, let's really muck the game up. Like, that was part of their tactical plan. I thought United and Arsenal it was just a physical game, and the referee was going to let a lot go, which, again, the Saka yellow itself isn't a problem to me. Is sort of like, really, of all, that's the only thing you saw in this game. Because there were not a lot of fouls called at all.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Interesting. Is there more that you want to say before we talk about player of the match?
There was a play, and I didn't. I think it was in the second half where a United player, I think it was Ahmad, goes down right around the edge of the box on what looks like a party challenge. Do you know the play I'm thinking of?
I think I remember it. Yeah,
okay.
I think if I'm thinking of the same one, I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
yeah, because there was definitely a penalty shout from United there. I don't know.
Right.
If we're thinking of, I hate to do this describing play, and I can't for the life of me remember where it was. When it was. I'm pretty sure it was in the second half. But I mean, what did you think about that one? If we're thinking about the same play.
Whatever the commentators said to explain why it wasn't given made sense to me at the time. I think it was just basically. Am I maybe thinking of one? You said it was who made the challenge? I think it was
Party was on the ground. It looked like the replay I saw actually looked like he slipped the last time I looked at the replay, which again, as we discussed, could very well have happened in this game.
Right. Maybe I am thinking of a different one. I'm thinking of when the one player like kind of caught Gabriel's shoulder in our box and went down, and Gabriel was more or less standing his ground, kind of like we talked about with the penalty from the last game, the same type of challenge. Maybe I'm not remembering which one you're talking about.
Maybe it was definitely the kind of thing where we looked at. I know we were watching as a group and sort of looked back and was like, it would be a very harsh penalty to give. I think it was the right call. He ended up stepping on, not like stomping on Party, but his foot came down on Party, and that's what caused him to lose balance. But Party is in a very poor position. He's prone on the ground. It's not. Party was very sloppy. I don't know. What did you think? What did you think of? We mentioned Jorginho. I mean, what did you think of? Because he didn't play really in this one. It was really Party. What did you think of Party's performance today? Yesterday? Because I was. It wasn't good.
Yeah,
from my perspective.
A lot of the mistakes were his sloppy giveaways, slipping. Like I noticed him slip. Not that it's necessarily his fault, but I noticed him slipping in more conspicuous ways than I did with other players. It's interesting that Arteta has been putting him in once he got off the DL, right? Because we've seen that he hasn't made certain other changes, right? Like Martinelli has been coming on late still. You would think with the nature of his injury, he's probably mostly okay by now, but you don't really question it because Trossard is doing a good job, in having him as a starter feels like it makes sense, and it's kind of like not messing with success. And I think they specifically point out, I think this is the same starting lineup that we had in the previous match also. Like they didn't change anything. And I do wonder why reinsert, like we've been doing so well, why not kind of keep Party on the bench for the rest of the season and bring him back in next season when we're this close to the end and the title is on the line? That's kind of what I'm more curious about.
I mean, I do think Party is an interesting player because he can do a lot. He's much more versatile than Jorginho. He does so much defensively and offensively in terms of his passing, his ability to run and cover ground. There's a lot to him, and I think it's a case of he's healthy, so Arteta wants him to play, and presumably he's playing well in training. I know training matters, obviously, to Arteta and to most managers. Yeah. But I do think, I don't know how much of it is rust, how much of it is injuries might be catching up to him, because he's had a lot of problems with injuries since coming to Arsenal. But he hasn't been great. I know he gives us an extra dimension. He actually provides a lot of cover for Declan Rice and allows Rice to go further forward in a way that he sort of can't with Jorginho. When he's with Jorginho in the midfield, so I get it in the sense of I understand why you would want a party on the field. I have to say we were shocked again as the group. We were shocked that he ended up playing the whole game. Like surely he's been ticketed to come off. I mean, he did eventually come off and Kivior actually had to look that up, but he did eventually come off. But we were a little surprised that didn't come sooner, like that. Not necessarily. It was in
stoppage time that he subbed out. Yeah,
right. So it's not even so much a substitution as it was a tactical substitution. Was almost a time wasting substitution. But then again, there was a fair amount. You do see those a lot.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I get the term. It's funny. I haven't heard that before, but it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, and again, he was, there were about 5 more. I'm just looking at this that said he came in the 92nd minute and the game ended in 97th. So there was time, there was opportunities. As we talk about, it was after that when Raya picks up his time wasting yellow. So it was still something. The game was, obviously it was, 1-0, so the game was very much in doubt, obviously, but
yeah.
I was a bit surprised because he had a few other instances in the game where it's like, and is he still maybe not? Again, nobody's really healthy at this point in the season. People are tired, you're carrying knocks and niggles and all those kinds of things. Nobody's fully healthy. Maybe he takes the summer and he's back to close to his old self, or maybe this is kind of the level he is now. And again, you start thinking of the summer in terms of places we might add on the pitch is central midfield, one of those places. I don't know.
Yeah, I can see that. All right, so before we talk about player of the match, let's take a little break and talk about Zencastr. So Zencastr, spelled Zencastr, there is no final E. That is what we use for recording every episode. I just open it up in Chrome, and then Keith does. We click record, and that's it. And that's because it is so super easy to record a podcast with Zencastr. You just log in using your browser and start recording a high-quality podcast right away. Record studio-quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests. Feel a sense of zen, knowing Zencastr's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. It is an all-in-one solution, so if you have thought about podcasting before and gave up thinking you needed a lot of different tools and services, those days are over. With Zencastr's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast all in one place and distribute to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations. So if that sounds good to you, go to zencastr.com/pricing and use our code Gooner, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experience as we do for all our podcasting and content needs. It's time for you to share your story. So, player of the match, what are your thoughts?
This was kind of tough because a lot of them didn't play very well.
Yes.
I know Trossard scored, but there were a lot of instances where, it's like, okay, he's clearly kind of limited. Havertz was a little more anonymous than usual. Saka, you sort of go down the list of guys, especially going forward, who I didn't think were that great. So I'm going to say William Saliba.
Yeah, I
thought the defense played pretty well overall. We talked about how they limited the dangerousness of United's opportunities to a certain extent. That tackle was fantastic.
Surgical.
It's amazing. He is one of those guys. He can do that. So I'm going to say Saliba. Although I actually am going to throw in a bit of an honorable mention for Mikel Arteta.
Oh yeah. A little unorthodox.
I'm going to do this though because I think, again, how do you judge a performance process versus results? For this team to come in and play the way they did. And again, Arteta trying to keep them, keep their heads focused, but to play the way they did in the context they did, in the environment they did. And it was an interesting environment. There's very much a place where we score an early goal, a really early goal, 2 early goals, and the crowd turns on United, and then it becomes a really rough atmosphere for them. But that obviously didn't happen. They obviously had to grow into the game much more. But overall, I think Arteta putting us in the position, getting the win at Old Trafford, having us, taking the title race to the last day. It is coming down to the absolute wire. Having a team, helping to build a team with the mental fortitude to push their way through this, to win when they're not at their best, to win in a difficult environment, to be in a position to maybe win a title. In some respects, that's the kind of thing. It's the kind of thing that didn't happen Sunday. It happened in all the days before Sunday, and Sunday is the result of all of that. So yeah, I do think a shout to Arteta for this game in particular, if not necessarily just this season as a whole. But we can talk about that. We'll save that a little bit more for next week.
Well, yeah, and I mean, kind of on that note, there is definitely a great deal to be said for a team who still wins when they're clearly not playing their best. That even our mid-grade game is still better than a lot of other teams. So, yeah, it's
what champions do.
Yeah. For me, I had the same challenge you did. I think ultimately, I considered Raya for staying awake as well as he did. It is challenging when the shots just don't come near the goal very much. But clearly the defense did a great job. Saliba definitely caught my attention, as mentioned. I think this time I probably will give it to Ben White, and I think it's appropriate in this match that it be a defender. Our offense was not producing goals. Our defense did protect against all onslaught and, did keep it at a clean sheet again. So I think Ben White, just because maybe it's from the article that we talked about last week, I'm thinking about it more in the dark arts a little bit. I definitely saw his mouth moving when he was in Garnacho's vicinity from some of the sideline camera shots. I was definitely thinking in that direction a little bit. It was so Ben White for me. All right, so with player of the match out of the way, we haven't had time to talk about any of my general soccer and Arsenal questions in a while because we've had 2 match weeks and really interesting matches with a lot to talk about, and this week a little bit less so. So first, you kind of alluded to this earlier, but just to kind of get a full description on the record. So as you know, I very often do not watch live. I do when I can, but I'm not bothered when I can't because I am not living online and seeing results spoiled for me. And I've developed habits. Like I know when I'm going to watch the match, I know what I need to do to avoid seeing the score. So I can go in and I very rarely am able, I very rarely go to watch a replay and already know what happens. So for me, that is effective. I get the same experience. I even try when I'm watching a full match replay. I generally don't pause it. I generally try and just let it go the whole time, aside from halftime or whatever. So you don't. And I know that there are times when, like, especially with midweek matches are the big example of this, where like neither of us really usually watches at least a whole match live because it's in the middle of the workday for us. Like under those circumstances, what is the reason for not going back and watching a full match replay? Is it just that you know the result and there isn't much point in it, or is there more to it than that?
No, that's pretty much it. It's because the game is result oriented. I mean, I have watched. I'll fully admit to watching classic games or historic games, or games that I have some sort of connection to, and I don't mean Arsenal, I mean just sports in general, because and then it really does become like you're like a movie you enjoy. You sort of ride the moment, or you feel the emotions.
Replaying the greatest hits.
Yeah, exactly. But it's kind of the dirty little secret, and the more games you watch and attend, you sort of realize this, is that most of them are relatively unmemorable.
Yeah.
I have been to baseball's a big one. I mean, obviously because baseball you play every day, but I've been to a bunch of baseball games, and most of them are completely immemorable. They blend together at a certain point. Was it that game I saw that? But because there's so many of them, and I always find it interesting because I'm not like a season ticket holder where I go to a game every day or every week. But it's one of those I always read my usual sites that do like pre or post game stories. Read them with a little bit more interest when it's a game I'm going to or have gone to. What did they see? What did I get at? How are we disagreeing within all of this? It's amazing how many of you go to and you just think for how many people involved in covering the game, it's so routine, right? Okay, yeah. We're going in, we're doing this. It was a game. Well, Arsenal scored a goal, and they made a few defensive plays, and they won. It comes off as being so rote, and for me, for you in particular, it's a big moment because of course you were there, and it's different. But for how it gets covered sometimes is very not quite this. How it gets covered is just not quite the same for the people who are there. So I guess if there's something interesting happened, or if I know there's some talking points, but usually if there's some like talking points, usually you can, especially nowadays, I can find those as highlights, and I don't need to watch a couple of cycling the ball around, or floating across into the box, the keeper that goes nowhere for the keeper. I can find the highlights and get the gist of what happened,
right?
As opposed to watching it unfold live. So
yeah, I got that.
That's my rationale generally.
Yeah, makes sense. Another question that occurred to me is so first of all, are free kicks given when there is, unwarranted contact or any other sort of foul away from the ball? Is there a free kick? And if there is, how do they decide where the ball is placed for the free kicks? I know the officials are usually pretty particular about, drawing the spot where the ball starts off. Yeah,
well, the spot is always where the foul was committed.
So even if it's away from the ball?
Yes. So this is I pulled up the laws of the game for this. This deals with fouls and misconduct. Direct free kick is awarded if a player commits any of the following offenses against an opponent in a manner considered by the referee to be careless, reckless, or using excessive force. Charges, jumps at, kicks or attempts to kick, pushes, strikes or attempts to strike, including a headbutt, tackles or challenges, trips or attempts to trip.
I'm picturing Bugs Bunny as the referee of a boxing match, like explaining all the stuff that you're not allowed to do. Yeah.
Notice nowhere in that does it say the player has to have the ball. Now we end up focusing a lot on that because, well, if you're off the ball, why would you foul the guy?
Right.
Foul. Generally speaking, the foul is attempt to stop the man with the ball.
Right.
On a lot of cases, stuff that happens off the ball, we usually only get caught on replay because the referee's not watching off the ball. So a lot of times that stuff happens because they know the referee's not looking. Now, that happens a lot less these days because there are so many cameras, and not even necessarily from a VAR perspective, but just they will see you, and maybe after the fact, and maybe there's a fine or something given to you later, but they'll see you. Actually, I guess the one I'm thinking, now as I talk my through this, the one I'm thinking of is Zinedine Zidane, his famous, his last kick as a member of France. So I shouldn't say his last kick. He headbutted an Italian player in a World Cup final.
Ooh.
And got tossed.
Red card?
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Okay.
He turns, and the ball is nowhere near them, and supposedly, I guess, I want to say was it Marco Materazzi? I think was who it was. He according to the story, he said something that Zidane either claims it was about his mother or heard something about his someone in his family. So he just turns and just slams his head, throws his head at his chest. Now, Materazzi, of course, died on the field briefly. But you can't headbutt people, and so that was a red. And I don't remember where the free kick was, but yeah, the referee can blow a foul for any of that stuff. It's just you so rarely are going to see that away from the ball because in most cases, why?
That feels so European to me, like between Italy and France playing each other. Like I can picture that particular exchange as you describe it so much more than an American arena between two American teams.
Well, I'm about to say throw some Latin American teams in there, and you can. Yeah. I mean, again, we talked about CONCACAF. I've seen some things.
Yeah.
But I will also add. I mean, it was in a World Cup final. It's an incredibly famous moment. Just afterwards, go go hop on the YouTube and look up Zidane headbutt, and you'll find it.
Yeah.
It is not hard to. It's an incredibly famous moment. Yeah, that's the thing I'll watch a replay for. Now I want to watch the whole game to see that.
So last, and this may be another one that maybe it is just the Occam's razor, like the thing that I think it probably is the answer, but just in case there's more to it or more nuance, like Saka is the subject of so many fouls and so much contact. Just the shirt pulls and everything else seems to happen to him so much more than other Arsenal players. Is it just because he's good and everyone knows it and they want to stop him more, or is there something more to it than that?
He's good and he has the ball.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to see fouls committed against players who don't have the ball. What's the point? You know, so since he typically has the ball, you know, he gets a lot of physical contact, and a lot of that is trying to slow down a very fast, very skilled player.
Yeah.
So that's just it. It's not, it's not quite what was in the NBA. Was it the hack-a-shack, like put a bad free throw shooter on the line? But part of it was also like, make him shoot 2 shots as opposed to getting a easy dunk. You know, Saka, you gotta do something to stop the guy, and that's generally what they choose to do. Maybe not as many fouls as we'd like to see called, but
right.
That's a conversation.
Fouls both called and uncalled on Saka. Yeah,
they're uncalled. They're not fouls, aren't they?
That's interesting. Yeah,
but yeah. I mean, again, it's basically he's good and he has the ball. That's why you don't see the same fouls against Saliba because he doesn't. I'm just a big player because he doesn't possess the ball that much the same way.
Yeah. I guess a foul is in the eye of the beholder, and specifically one beholder on the field, or a small number of beholders. Yeah.
Yeah, just the referee, really.
Yeah. All right. Well, what's coming up for next week?
It's a busy week in the league. First off, as Arsenal fans, I know this will hurt everyone, but remember, you're not rooting for Spurs. You're rooting against City. It's Monday as we record this. Tomorrow, Tuesday afternoon, Tottenham Hotspur host Manchester City. Yeah, we need City to not lose. They can draw. They just need to drop points. Either this game on Tuesday at Tottenham, a place where they have struggled typically, especially in Tottenham's new stadium.
Yeah.
And then they are home on Sunday against West Ham in the final day. I wouldn't really put a lot of stock in West Ham getting a result in Manchester.
Well,
at Tottenham, who knows?
But at Tottenham, did I hear correctly during the broadcast that Manchester City has never scored a goal at Tottenham's new stadium? In
a league game. I think they beat them earlier this year in the FA Cup. I want to look that up.
But yeah,
so it's interesting.
That's something, and that's their modern history. When Manchester City is the Manchester City we know, where they've been a really good team. That's encouraging.
Yeah. Now, as was pointed out somewhere else, I was listening to that. In those results where Spurs have gotten results and even wins, have been a Spurs team that has generally played very defensively, very bunker and counter under managers like Antonio Conte, but also had Harry Kane, which, all the jokes we make about Harry Kane aside, he's a really good player and he scores a lot of goals. City won in January at Tottenham in the 4th round of the FA Cup. So they have broken that, but not in the league yet, so who knows? I am of the opinion that if Tottenham does get a result and that we somehow then we win on Sunday, that we should definitely give them a standing ovation when they come in for the next North London derby. It's going to be very. I know it's apparently a weird thing for a lot of Spurs fans too, who are sitting there going, "Do we have to win?"
Yeah.
To see your hated rival, essentially to give your hated rival a shot at the title. But then again, their manager, Big Ange, sort of his response has been, why would you root for us to lose? But they play a very open offensive style under him, and it's given them some interesting things to look at. They certainly can be more pleasant to look at, to watch, than they have been in recent years. But anyway, we're talking about it. City. We need City to drop points. between now and either Tuesday or on Sunday against West Ham. If they do that and we beat Everton on Sunday, because by the way, that's our final game of the season, home to Everton. If that happens, then we are very likely to be champions. Now, we say this, there is a slight thing we should point out. Obviously, if we're going to play the scenarios out so we can walk through them.
Yeah.
If City draws one of their next two games and we win, and then City wins the other game, so they got to win and a draw in their last two, we would then be level on points. We would both be at 89 points to end the season. First tiebreaker, of course, is goal difference. We're currently at plus 61. City is at plus 58, so plus 3. Which means, theoretically, if they were to draw with Spurs, and then we beat Everton, if City beats Everton by more than, I guess it would be...
Or West Ham,
West Ham, sorry, we're playing Everton. Beats West Ham by 4 goals... it would have to be more than 4 goals, depending on how our game goes.
It'd have to be like 3 goals more than we beat Everton by.
Exactly. So there is a possibility, it is not entirely out of the realm of possibility that it would turn into that, because apparently it is goal difference and then goals scored. They have scored more goals than we have. They are at 91, we're at 89.
Oh, really? Okay, so that changed recently because we had the most goals scored in the league until this week, I think.
Yes, I mean they've been. I mean, in their last few games, I mean, just looking backwards, City has scored 4, 5, 2, 4, 5, 4. So that's since the draw with us. Yeah, they're rolling. I mean, they're locked in. They haven't lost a league game since December 6th.
Yeah.
And in fact, they haven't. That's the last game they've lost. Period. Because remember in the Champions League, those 2 games with Real were draws.
Right.
They've now granted, that again, that's insane. We have in the league 1 loss and 1 draw since the turn of the new year. It's astounding.
Yeah.
I mean, in spite of all this, obviously, we put a lot on it. I mean, again. When I think about the idea of City, we need Spurs to get a result. All I can think of is the scene from Animal House where they return the guy's car, and I'll bowdlerize it slightly, but just to say, you messed up. You trusted us. That's kind of where I am. Like, I know better. I don't really expect it to happen. But as we were in a really good mood on Sunday after the game, obviously with the win, but just the whatever the result, because the next time we talk will obviously be after it's all over.
Yep.
Whatever happens, we have had this has been an outstanding season. This is a fantastic team. We've done something incredible this year, and we should celebrate that. Whatever happens against Spurs on Tuesday, whatever happens to City and West Ham on Sunday, is Everton on Sunday. Because by the way, we're playing Everton on Sunday. It's the last day of the season, so everybody's playing at the same time. Whatever happens, Sunday should be a celebration of the season we've had, and Everton doesn't care, I think, about the results. So, as far as where the game is, we have no idea. NBC has yet to announce, at least in the US, which game is going to be on which network/service. I'm sure they're waiting on the result of the City Spurs game tomorrow. Potentially also Chelsea and Brighton play on Wednesday, as do Manchester United and Newcastle. So there's a few more games. I don't know because there are going to be some interesting contests for European spots. I don't know, but we'll see.
That's something else that I guess they were saying on the Arscast is another interesting factor going into the Tottenham Manchester City matches. Is Tottenham still in contention for Europa League or
Champions League? Yes,
or it is Champions League. Okay, I didn't remember which they were vying for.
Yeah, so they have to win out, and Villa has to lose at Crystal Palace. They're 5 behind Villa right now. So technically, because that was a big one today, Liverpool and Villa played to a 3-3 draw. They if you're Spurs, you really would have preferred Liverpool to win, of course. But with the draw, now Villa's 5 up on Spurs. If Spurs does not win tomorrow, Villa gets the 4th Champions League spot. Yeah. And I believe Tottenham is pretty much lined up for. I think would then be lined up for the Europa League spot. I think they are. Pull up the table real quick. They're well. I guess technically they are 6 points clear. They're 6 points clear of Newcastle, who I guess if they win their 2 remaining games and Spurs were to lose both of theirs, then maybe I don't know who they have on the weekend, and I honestly don't really care. And Newcastle's in a fight with Chelsea, who's at 57, and then United technically has a shot at the Conference League. Although United still has the FA Cup final, not this coming Sunday, but the following Sunday against City. So, so there are still some interesting permutations left, and a lot of that stuff I think is going to play into what games wind up on like NBC or what have you. So we'll see. I'm sure. Obviously, NBC will tell us when they're good and ready, and we'll find out what. We'll find out how that goes. And then at the bottom, Burnley and Sheffield have been relegated, and Luton is all but relegated.
Yeah.
They would. They would have to win and overturn like a 12 goal difference spread with Forest. They're down. All 3 promoted teams are going down.
Yeah. That's interesting when it works out that way. That's all 3 of them as a triplet.
It is apparently only the second time that's happened in the Premier League era, I think.
Interesting. I would think that's pretty rare.
Yeah.
All right. One other quick note before we sign out is I'd never before, so this is our last match wearing this kit, which I'd never before heard called the Toxic Waste Kit, which I love. I think that is a brilliant name for it.
It grew on me to a point.
Agreed.
To a point.
Yep.
I still prefer a more traditional yellow for the second, but
yeah, definitely. All right. Well, thanks for joining us at Gooner U. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also listen to our show on Apple, Spotify, and some other places. If you're only listening, try watching us on YouTube with a link in the show notes. Your homework for today is to comment on the video. Ask a question, share a story or reaction, or just say hi. We'd love it any way you choose. Thanks again to our sponsor, Zencastr. Check out our description for links to everything we talk about, including our sponsor and our Instagram and Twitter pages. Yes, we have an Instagram account now, and I intend to post all of our reels or all of our shorts for YouTube as reels on Instagram. Again, my name is Dove, and you can find me on Twitter at Dove Frankel. With me, as always, is Keith, and you can find him in a pub watching Arsenal matches.
Rooting against City, not for Spurs.